Okay, here we are in our second in this series of videos about adding navigation to our website wireframes and ultimately our websites themselves. We've started the process and you can see we have an unordered list here inside of our layout, right inside of Firefox in our 960-demo HTML file. We have 6 elements in the list and it looks pretty bad. It's totally unformatted right now. It doesn't even fit with inside this navigation box that we've defined, and it needs a lot of styles to make it actually work. So what we're going to do now is go back into Vim, open up our style sheet, and add those styles. So here we go. First things first, we need to figure out what selector we want to use. We know that we want to change the appearance of LI tags. Back inside of Firefox, each of these lines is an LI tag. And we also know that we only want to affect LI tags inside of our navigation because maybe we have a list somewhere else and we don't want that list to be affected by whatever styles we're defining here. So given those two facts and given that this is our current markup in HTML, we have our nav tag containing our unordered list and then our 6 li elements. We have a really good selector that we can use, and that is nav space li. Nav space li means we're going to apply whatever rules follow, whatever declarations follow, to every li tag inside of the nav tag. And that's going to limit these styles to our navigation lists. Okay, so we open up the rule by adding an open curly brace. We'll come down a line, indent a little bit here, and we're going to add our first declaration, our first property value pair. And first thing we want to do is change the display value for this particular item. So we'll come in here and say display. Now, you may recall there are a couple of different properties we can set display to be. We can set it to be none if we wanted an item to be invisible, removed from a page. We can set it to block if we want it to appear as a block level element. Or we can set it to inline if we want the element to appear as an inline level element. Now, you'll recall there are a couple of key differences between block level and inline level elements. Block level elements appear in a stacked fashion. If I put an H1 tag followed by an H2 tag, they're going to appear one after the other on separate lines, and that's because they're both block level elements. The other key factor with a block level element is we have additional properties that we can apply to that element. We can add things like margins, we can add borders. These properties aren't available for inline level elements. Inline elements include things like the span tag, the EM tag, the image tag is in fact an inline level element as well. They appear side by side and we can't add things like margins to them. Okay, let's come back here then inside of Vim and look at a different kind of value we can set on this property. And that is the inline dash block value, inline dash block. Now, as you might guess, inline dash block applies a combination of inline properties and block level properties to this particular element. So because it's a block, that means we can add not only borders, but borders, margins, padding. Because it's inline, that means the elements naturally are going to appear side by side. Okay, so let's add this line, save, come back to Firefox, refresh, and there we go. So a couple things have happened here. We've lost the bullets, which is good, we don't want those, and the elements are now appearing side by side, and that's good as well. Okay, great. So from here we can move on and add a few additional properties to further change how this appears here. Let's go ahead and change the color on this. So we'll come in here Actually, before we do that, let's add a background color to the mix. And we'll set it to be a lighter shade of gray. Save that, refresh. There we go. Adding background colors is always a really good way of seeing exactly how our elements and our regions are lining up and behaving. And this makes it clear that unlike in our first demo where everything was the same width, now each of these elements is exactly as wide as it needs to be to accommodate the text. Now that's okay, but it would be nice if we had a little bit of padding here between the text and the background. So let's go in and add some padding. So we'll come after our display, we'll add padding. We're going to make it the same all the way around, so we'll just use our shorthand and specify one numeric value, 10 pixels. That means top, right, bottom, left, all are going to be 10 pixels. We'll refresh. Okay, that's looking a little bit better there, not too bad. All right, let's say we added a margin to this as well. We'll come up a line and add our margin, and let's specifically work on the right margins. Let's say we set it to 0 first, just to see what happens. Margin right is 0. We'll come back to Firefox and refresh. Okay, that doesn't actually have an effect. Let's just set all the margins to 0, see what that does. Okay. Okay, that got rid of some of that extra space in there. Now, we still have some space in between elements, as you can see here. There's a little space in between each, but we certainly got rid of quite a bit. Sometimes that extra space can actually be caused by the way we've laid elements out in our HTML document. Just to make sure that's not the case, I'm going to take this first li tag, the second li tag I should say, move it next to the first, so home and about are right next to each other. And now I can refresh that. Okay, and sure enough, that took care of that little bit of extra space that we had in there. Now, you may be wondering, well, wait a minute, HTML ignores white space. That's true, although I have more than white space. I have actual spaces in between here, and those are going to count as at least one space. So if I move this up, come back, refresh, you'll see that stories butts right up against about now. If I add in just a single space right here, save that, now it's come back. Now, when we say HTML ignores white space, what that means is I add additional spaces here, come back to Firefox, there's no change. But that one space does still make a difference. So we're going to want to come in and delete all these spaces, save that, and now we can come back and get rid of it. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and move all of these up so we're not dealing with any more space than we want. We'll come back to the beginning of this line and get rid of these spaces. Okay, and let's just come over here and we'll do this last one. Okay, good. Save that and refresh in Firefox. Okay, now our navigation is starting to look a little bit better here. A couple things we still want to change. One is the color of the font. Okay, let's try changing the color by coming back to our style sheet and adding the color property here to my list of declarations. And I'm going to make it, let's make it a very dark gray. We'll make it 333. Save that and refresh. Okay, nothing happened. Why not? Well, because even though we've just defined the color is also being defined for the A tag. And the A tag is more proximate, it's closer to our content than is the li tag that we're specifying here. And that means the A tag is going to take precedence. Now, there are a couple ways we can address this. One of them is to use the important tag that we went over in class. So if I add the important modifier here, save that, we should be able to have that take effect. Oh, even that didn't work. Well, that's interesting. So important usually can override these settings. This is a case where it's just not going to be enough, though. That's okay, because we do have something else we can do. What we'll do is copy this line, delete it, and I'm going to come in here, and whoop, I need to add a closing curly brace there. Let's add one more selector. This time it's going to be nav li a. Now we're targeting the same level as the a tag, and whoops, now we can add our color 333. Save that and see if our change takes effect, and it does. Okay, good. While we're in here, why don't we also remove the underlines? And we can do that by, whoops, adding a text decoration property. I think this is a new one for us, text decoration. This can be used to underline text if you set the value to be underlined, or you can remove underlines by setting the value to none. So we'll do the latter. We'll set the value to none, and we'll refresh that. Okay, looking a little bit better. And now we can come back up here, and I set my margin to 0. Let me see what happens if I remove that line and save. I'm not sure if I actually have margins in place. I do. Okay, I had forgotten about that. So let's see exactly how these margins are working. If I set the margin left to 0, let's see what I get. Okay, so that was all margin left. Now, with margin left set to 0, I could come in and set my margin right, and I could make it, say, 20 pixels. And by setting margin right after I've cleared out margin left, I can control the spacing, but my first item is going to be flush right along the side here. And that's not too bad. There it is. Okay, now we're making some good progress. We've got something that actually looks like a half-decent navigation. Let's talk about a few more things we can change. Clearly, we can change things about the font, like the weight. We'll come back down to the A selector here, the nav li a selector, and let's add a line, and we'll say font weight is bold.